Welcome to episode 1 of Inspect. My name is AJ.
And I'm Les.
Inspect is a show about web development, design and technology. So today is just going to be a bit of an introduction about us, where we're from, how we got into the industry, a little bit about our backgrounds, plans for this year, plans for the future, just so that the listeners can get to know us a little bit. So I guess, do you want to kick it off, Les? Let us know a bit about you.
So, as I've already said, my name's Les. I've been a software developer for about 6-ish years. Started off in front end and slowly moved into the dark side of .NET technologies. I'm a recent father of 2 beautiful twins, and that's me. What about you, AJ?
So yeah, my name's AJ. I'm a front end developer working on UI development. I started off as a designer, and then I've been doing front end design since around about 2008. Also a father. But yeah, that's me in a nutshell. But I suppose we could probably go into a bit more depth. So do you want to start from the beginning, like where you grew up and how you kind of got into the industry, and take it from there, really?
So I sort of I was born and bred in Chertsey, southeast of England, and sort of I didn't actually live there with my parents, but I always stayed there with my grandparents. And while growing up, it was pretty rural. It was farmland, rudimental sort of construction sort of industries for the family and for what I was growing up around. And there was not really much there's no tech at all really into it. And that sort of was pretty common, even throughout school, until I was about 17, 18, in which I did a multitude of different jobs before eventually finding my calling while out in South Africa as a front-end developer.
Bit of a long way to travel to find out what you're going to do for work, right?
Well, yeah, true. I mean, one of the jobs that I was doing at that time was a courier for the music industry. So what I was doing is the master records and all that sort of stuff is I had to have the whole briefcase handcuffed to your wrist, going to the different distribution warehouses, factories, manufacturing plants, and really jet setting around the world. Not really seeing any of it at all. But so that was sort of my role. My dad emigrated to South Africa, where he owned a hotel, and I went out to visit him. And the stepmom was like, "Oh, you're the right generation. You can build a website." Being one always up for a challenge, I said, "Why not?" And then was like, "Yeah, I actually quite enjoy this compared to everything else." So that's been my life since I've been 21.
Okay, all right, interesting. Quite a big change then. So when did you move to where we are now? Where are you living now?
So I'm living pretty actually very close to where my parents sort of brought me up. So I'm in Binfield, still in the southeast, quite close to London. And only recently, I've always worked for digital agencies and software houses, local. But now recently I've started my own company. So it's pretty much. Oh, you can hear the little one there.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's me. I mean, where did you grow up, and sort of how did you end up in web development?
Right. So I grew up around West London in Hounslow. Did most of my schooling around there, and then I got into web development probably quite late, actually, after university even. But before that, while I was at high school, I was quite interested in all the creative subjects there. So I studied art, I studied graphic design, music, throughout the years, and yeah, I was always quite interested in the sort of creative side of the subjects. And I really wanted to actually take on music in university as well, but I don't know, just one thing led to another. It didn't really work out that way, and I ended up going to university and doing computer science, which wasn't really my original choice, but it was just where I ended up. You know how it is. And I didn't really like it very much. I never liked programming. It just wasn't. I didn't really have the head for it at that time. So I did. Obviously, I finished my degree, but in the back of my mind, it was always like, really don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. I want to pursue like one of the creative arts as much as I can. And then I got a job just after university, but it was working for this company in Hempstead. It was actually a payphone company, not the most exciting. But they were going through this sort of transition where they're converting their payphones into internet kiosks. So I was getting to work with computers quite a lot, and learning a bit more about sort of software and the way it was all being sort of put together, and that was quite interesting. And then at that same time, my brother at the time was working for an agency. He's a web developer as well. He's a .NET developer, so he was working for an agency, and then he was approached by someone to do some freelance work, but the freelance work involved some design, and he's not a designer. He knew that I had a passion for these sorts of things, so me and him sort of joined forces, and we formed a company. So myself, him, and a friend of ours, and we were just working from home in our spare time, and working on this freelance project that he had. And then things took off from there. And after university, it just realised that I actually got quite good. I'm really liking design now, and it's something that I definitely want to pursue. So after that, we just we formed a company, the three of us, and that grew. Actually, we did it for I was with that company for about 10 years until I exited it. I exited around 2010, I think it was 2010, 2011ish.
So is that company still going?
Yeah, the company still exists. It's so it had a few years of growth, and it reached sort of a peak of about 15 people, I think it was. And then as the sort of projects became the number of projects reduced, the company, we started focusing on just one or two clients and focusing all our energy on those. Then the headcount slowly reduced as well, and now there's just sort of a few people just running it and servicing those clients. But they're sort of big projects as well. But it was just something that I outgrew myself.
Yeah.
For like career progression wise. Yeah. So when I then exited the company that I started, I had a few jobs at a few different agencies. I worked for BT for a little while, and then I worked for another brand on the client side, and then I joined the agency where obviously I met you. So that was about a year ago now, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was about a year. I think I've been there probably about 5 or 6 months before you joined. But no, yeah, that was the start, quoting the Casablanca film, of a beautiful friendship.
Yeah, lovely, isn't it? But yeah, that was good. I mean, I really enjoyed the job, and then it just obviously just ended in a bit of a crap way. So for the benefit of people listening, me and Les used to work together at a digital agency, and back in November last year, in 2016, depending on when you're listening to this, the company went into liquidation, and the whole company became made redundant. So it wasn't a huge team. It was about 30, wasn't it? About 30 people.
Yeah, it was about 30 people.
Yeah, but it wasn't great. Obviously, we were all being made redundant all at the same time, and it was quite a bit of a difficult time actually towards the end of last year. But yeah,
Yeah, I suppose it was the sort of shock, because it was quite out of the blue. Um, Unfortunately, a couple of clients were holding payments and that sort of stuff to the company, unbeknown to the workforce. But what made it so shocking and out of the blue was that everyone was an expert in their own field, really likable, really friendly. Everyone would go out of their way to do anything for everyone else. It was one of the best places I've ever worked. And for it to end under such circumstances was just, well, like you said, pretty crap.
Yeah, because that's what makes the job worthwhile, isn't it? It's the people you work with. It's not really about the company or the actual clients. It's the team that you're part of. And yeah, we had a really good team there. But it's been good because obviously a lot of people have kept in touch, and obviously me and you are still working on this project together. And yeah, it's quite a supportive team, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. So I mean, pretty much everyone's kept in touch, and everyone's looking out for each other. Even now, I mean, I believe it's what, 4-ish months, 4 or 5 months after the event.
Mm.
The WhatsApp group's still going strong. Comments on it every now and again. And no, it's when once you meet good people, once you've met professionals and stuff, it makes everything so much easier. But you are completely right. At the end of the day, what we do in technology normally boils down to pixels or ones and zeros. And you can be doing that for anyone, anywhere, and you're just doing it for money. But what really makes it worth getting up in the morning and interacting on those projects is the people, um, hands down.
Yeah, absolutely, definitely.
So, what do you sort of think about these sort of designers to developers or developers to designers? It's quite a hot topic that's debated quite a lot. Where some people say that you need to be specialist, a jack of all trade is a master of none.
Mm.
That sort of comment, or you have other people that say that to know both actually empowers you to make the right decisions.
I think it depends on your. I think it depends on the type of mind that you got. If you're very sort of, if your mind is works in the sort of very calculative way, then maybe you are suited just to being a developer.
Yeah,
Whereas if you more of a sort of creative problem solver, then being a designer is probably quite a good skill to have. Especially as a front end developer, it's handy knowing about design as well, because
mm,
a lot of the time I can make decisions, or I can make assumptions about what designers are trying to do with their designs. Whereas if you know, suppose if you're a designer and you know how to code as well, that could also maybe stifle your creativity a little bit because you know what's possible and what's not.
at that moment in time, because as
Yeah,
we all know, tech is always like marching forward.
yeah,
Um,
it's a
so especially now, it's like I've seen a few designs recently which baffled me that they're actually done in HTML and they're not like videos playing in the background. It's been really cool stuff.
yeah. So if you know how to create that sort of stuff, then you've got the freedom to design that as well, right? But
Yeah,
if you don't know how to build something like that, then
you're never going to think of it.
yeah, you might not, as a designer developer, you might not even attempt to design something that's got that level of creativity if you personally don't know how it can be built. Whereas if you're just a designer and not a developer, you may design something which is completely out of quite left field, not knowing
Yeah,
whether it's possible to be built or not. And if it's not possible, then your ideas may be pushed back.
yeah. I think that follows a similar sort of concept for sort of the more back end sort of dev roles. Is as a junior and actually throughout whatever stage of career you are, if you don't know the tools or technologies exist for a certain problem, you don't use them and you end up having to try creating your own and doing all that sort of stuff just because you don't know of it. So if you don't know it, you can't use it. As a example, is one of the first things I did as a back end developer is I recreated the entire model validation for the web forms, just because I didn't know it existed at the time. Um,
Yeah,
but I suppose as a on the opposite side of things, as a designer, if you don't know what exists, you can dream up the world. But if you do know, or your thought process is limited by what you know, um, like you said, the creativity is stifled.
yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. You said it a lot better than I did. But um, yeah, I think essentially, I think it overall, I think it's good to have experience in both, if possible. But I've got no qualms with people who are just designers and don't want to touch any code. And I've got no qualms
Yeah,
with programmers who have no interest in doing any design. Be a specialist in your field, and that's great. If you can do both, great. But if you can't, or if you don't want to, or if you can't, just focus on what you're good at and do it to the best of your ability, and let other people worry about the other bits.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know,
It's.
you
I
know.
mean, one of the things.
I'm sorry. I'm my By no means am I a back end developer, but I'm happy to sort of get involved and you know dip into the back end code as well, to as much as I can. But it's not my core skill, so I'll leave it to the experts.
Yeah, you can sort of you can help out and you can um, without being derogatory.
Yeah,
You can monkey patch the bits, but when it comes down to the true experts and what they can do is they know their stuff because it's their domain.
yeah. I know enough to know what is probably possible and is probably the right answer, but
Yeah,
I'm not going to be the one to actually figure out the right answer, if you know what I mean.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Well, funny enough, talking about that, as we're sort of front back end, as a sort of full stack developer, the reason why I've gone more back end in recent years is purely down to the fact of the front end is moving much faster than the back end technologies and code, and I'm sure people will disagree. But also at the same time is you don't have to get the back end absolutely perfect. Um, as long as it works and it's performant, you can. There's a million and five ways to skin a cat. But on the front end, especially with you've got like website profilers and speed analysts and SEO marketers and the new meta data and all that sort of stuff, is the normally seems to be only one way, and unless you're an expert in all of those areas, and that's discounting design from which is another big part. Then your user experience, all that sort of stuff. It's just a huge domain to be try and keep afloat of.
yeah. I mean, just look at any recent job spec. You look at a front end job spec these days, and they'll ask you for. They'll obviously have HTML, CSS, JavaScript on there as your core three skills, but then they'll list every other framework that's available, just
Yeah,
as a requirement. But then you wonder, like, are these companies actually using all these frameworks, or do they just want someone who can cover all bases? And you'll see things like, oh, and minimum 5 years of Angular 2, but it hasn't even been around for 5 years. Or they'll just, yeah, it's just ridiculous, really.
yeah.
But it's worth knowing.
Well, that's the thing. It's the industry we live in. It's, I mean, front, back end, system admin, or cloud specialist, whatever title you want to put yourself to. Is at the end of the day, we're all geek slash technology minded. And the industry we're in is pretty much just one of constant learning and progression. Uh, you can't really box yourself in too much. I mean, of course, design and front end it has clear boundaries, and you can either muddy the waters or you can be on one of the sides. But when you're in technology, like you're sort of saying, it's pretty much as if you're a front end developer. No doubt you're going to end up start playing with web services, moving more into the sort of the back end, the server side stuff, or as common trends are, you do everything in the client side, and the server becomes more and more redundant. Or vice versa, as a back-end developer, you're always going to end up writing a bit of JavaScript, putting out some HTML markup, um, editing element attributes. We all work in the same ecosystem, and yeah, we've given ourselves labels to sort of highlight the technologies that we use, but it's all the same, really. Or that's my opinion, anyway.
Okay, yeah, it's hard to keep up with it. I mean, have you got any goals for this year? Anything that you're trying to focus on this year?
Well, so every other year, I have had goals. So I'm like, this year I'm going to learn a new framework. I'm going to achieve this. I'm going to release an app or that sort of stuff. But this year, with the arrival of the twins, and the unfortunate ending of the company that I was working at as it went into liquidation, 2017 has been pretty much blown out the water in terms of goals. I mean, I've set up my own company now. It's doing really well, and I'm trying to get that work-life balance or work-twin balance in order. But apart from that, really, it's learn as much as I can, have as much fun as I can, and hopefully, as soon as I get some sort of sanity, start actually putting some proper goals in. What about you?
Yeah, so I've actually got a few actually. I've jotted a few down, and I've got this repo set up on GitHub, which has a list of just stuff like long-term goals that I'd like to achieve this year. I put it on GitHub because I thought it's actually an idea I got from someone else about being sort of transparent about your goals and making yourself accountable by putting them public. So yeah, I just created a checklist basically on GitHub, and yeah, it's got a few things on there. I mean, I'd like to dabble with a different programming language. I was thinking maybe Ruby or Swift. I have been playing around with Swift a little bit, but I just haven't had enough time to dedicate to it. But one of my main goals for this year was to get involved with a podcast or to actually start one myself, and obviously that's one that I can sort of tick off the list now because things have started. So I definitely want to obviously keep up this podcast and help it, make sure it grows and stuff like that. But the main reason for actually wanting to do that in the first place is because one of the other goals I've got is to do some more public speaking. Yep. So I figured that this would just give me a bit of a grounding of just talking about certain topics and just some practice basically. Without the pressure of having to do it on the stage straight away. It's just something that I've never really been great at is talking in front of a crowd. So that's something I'm trying to work on for this year. But yeah, so I've got a list of goals that I'm trying to achieve, and yeah, there's a few other just stuff like be more healthy and things like that. But work-wise, yeah, I'd like to sort of get involved with it, try and learn a different programming language, something that I haven't worked with before. I'm leaning towards Ruby. I think that's something I'd like to try. I've got a little bit of a start with it because I've been playing around with Jekyll, which is Ruby based. So I've got, I've started on that goal, but not enough to tick it off yet.
So what sort of aspects of Jekyll are you using? And what is it for those that might not know?
Okay, so Jekyll's a static site generator. So it's kind of like a hybrid between a dynamic website and a static website. So you're using like CMS style templates to generate static HTML files. So the website for the podcast, inspect.fm, that's built using Jekyll. My own personal,
cool.
Yeah. So my own personal website is built using Jekyll as well, and I mean it's good. It's good for sites which probably don't need updating very often, or are going to be updated by the developer. So I wouldn't use Jekyll for a client's project where they're expected to update the site themselves, because once the site is being built with Jekyll, it always needs to be updated,
in Jekyll.
Yeah, maintained using Jekyll to generate the site. But it's pretty good. It's quite quick to knock out a site, and the end result, because it's all static HTML files with no databases or anything like that, the site generally runs a lot faster, I've noticed.
Well, yeah, I believe the BBC website, the news part, uses static site generators to circumvent the whole database sort of stuff. So they've got a CMS in the back end, and then it all just compiles the static code, and that's what's deployed.
Well, okay. Well, if the BBC are using it, then I'll definitely be an advocate for it as well. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. We should probably do some research into it and talk about it in a bit more depth in another show. Because
Yeah,
there are
definitely.
alternatives. There are other static site generators as well. There's Hugo. There's Jekyll's the main one that I use. There's probably others. I haven't really looked into any others.
Well,
Middleman is another one, I think. Middleman.
I mean, I've tried to build my own with Umbrico as a base. So basically use Umbrico as a CMS on a publishing platform, and then it statically generates all the files and stuff, and then that's what you deploy. It's not as easy as they all make it seem, but it's a really interesting topic and probably definitely one for an episode.
Yeah, so the way I've got my website working and the inspect website is that I've got Travis doing the build, and so I've got it all synced up with GitHub. So you make your changes, commit to the GitHub repo, then Travis watches the GitHub repo for changes, runs a build, and deploys it. So it's all automatic, and it's quite a good system. It may not be perfect. I mean, I'm not an expert in this yet, but it works for now. So
Well, that's the most important thing in tech, isn't it? Is everything changes. Best practices today could become anti-patterns tomorrow.
yeah,
But as long as it works and it does the job to an adequate or better standard, we can sort of pat ourselves on the back and move on to the next.
yeah, exactly. So far I'm quite enjoying it. So that's why I'm thinking that I might delve into Ruby a bit more, so I can maybe understand how Jekyll is working, and how it's what it's doing in the background.
So is that your main drive for learning Ruby?
Yeah, it's just something that I haven't tried. I've got exposure to PHP in the past. I've had exposure to .NET. I've never really had any exposure to Ruby. So I just want to try something different, just to get out of the comfort zone a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm also learning Sketch at the moment as well. I've always been a Photoshop user, but in the past few weeks I've started messing around with Sketch. So that's another
How are
one
you
for this
finding
year.
it?
It's good, but it's slowing me down a lot. I'm just not used to it. I've been using Photoshop and Illustrator for so long. I'm so used to them, and I'm just having to sort of reset all my muscle memory now and trying to learn a new tool. But I will stick with it. I will stick with it for a little while because I know it's got a lot of potential. It is a really good tool, but it's just slowing me down. Okay, well, yeah, maybe we should leave it there. It's been a good chat. I think that's been quite a good first episode. And yeah, if you guys listening have enjoyed what you've heard so far, hit the subscribe button wherever you're listening to this, in iTunes or on your RSS feed. And we will catch you in the next episode.
Right, dude. Catch you later.
Later.
Bye.